front line of any war is a dangerous place. So imagine being in the fighting on the front line and not having a weapon. Instead, having to carry a camera, and I don't mean one of these, but heavy film equipment that's just not suited to combat conditions, and it weighed 90 kilos, as much as a baby elephant. Damien Para first discovered he had a talent for taking remarkable photographs when he joined his high school's camera club. His photos were so good, in fact, he won a prize for photography in a competition run by a Melbourne newspaper. He knew then he wanted to be a photographer and a filmmaker. On leaving school, finding a job as a cameraman during the Great Depression wasn't easy, but Para's abilities caught the attention of the famous Australian film producer Charles Chauvel, who appointed him to shoot several movies, including the Australian World War I epic 40,000 Horsemen. When the Second World War broke out, Para was enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, the AIF, and assigned the role of official war photographer for the Department of Information, sailing with the AIF from Melbourne to Libya to record the troops in action in the deserts of the Middle East. As part of the film unit, Para saw himself as a link between the soldiers on the battlefield and the people at home. In those days, there wasn't even television in Australia, let alone Google or Instagram, and to tell the experiences of the men and women who served on the front line, he needed to be there with them. Para photographed and filmed the early victories in Libya and the fighting in Greece and Syria and at the siege of Tobruk. His photography and films depicting the fighting in the Middle East provided a first-hand account of the political, social and cultural environment that is part of war. In January 1941, Para put himself in the firing line, filming from the deck of the warship HMS Ladybird during the bombardment of Bardia in Libya. With another famous Australian wartime photographer, Frank Hurley, he captured the dramatic siege of Tobruk. 3 days later, he accompanied C Company, 2nd 11th Battalion, in its attack on the aerodrome at Derna. He took footage in the Greek and Syrian campaigns and flew on an air raid with the Australian crew of a Royal Air Force Blenheim bomber. Soon, his images were broadcast in newsreels across the world. When Japan entered the Second World War, Para was sent to cover a new battlefront, this time in the jungles of New Guinea. The soldiers admired and respected him, welcoming him into their dugouts. He accompanied them on patrols where he was able to capture the human side of war. Sometimes Damien disobeyed orders to get the story. He disliked staged reenactments. He preferred to be at the front line, often risking his life to race ahead of the action, where he would turn around and walk backwards to film his advancing comrades. His footage of the brutal fighting between Australian and Japanese soldiers along the Kokoda track in New Guinea suddenly confronted everyday Australians with the horrors of a war in the jungle taking place so close to home. Thanks to Para's camera work, for the first time the world could now experience the appalling conditions for soldiers fighting at Kokoda. His footage released as the documentary Kokoda Front Line. In 1943, his remarkable film went on to win Australia's first Oscar at the Academy Awards for distinctive achievement in documentary production. The film's producer, Ken G. Hall, dedicated the award to Para for his bravery, skill and endurance. He made it possible. But eventually Damien's luck ran out. In September 1944, while walking backwards to film the faces of US Marines in the heat of battle on the island of Peleliu, he was killed by Japanese machine gun fire. His story of service is truly remarkable. He, like many of the soldiers he encountered in the jungle and the desert, served his profession with distinction, ultimately paying the highest price. Damien Para didn't carry a rifle into combat. Instead, his camera and the films he made became powerful weapons, revealing to the world the shocking reality of a world at war.